Cut hours? I got you. I work for one of the big auto parts stores. We don't have the catchy jingle. This week the top brass have been crying, cut hours, like their life was on the line. We barely have enough staff to run as it is. But today was a different scenario entirely. I got told to cut more hours. A little insight. Managers cannot go to lunch or leave our store without having another manager to take their place. Cue the malicious compliance. I cut the hours of 3 non-management employees and gave a few hours to someone who's been out of the country for family affairs. We had no layover between these hours, but that doesn't matter. Basically ended up with net 0 hours between cutting and adding. But they wanted me to go farther. I cut my own hours. We were scheduled for 2 managers for about 4.5 hours, just us. I called in the next non-management employee 2.5 hours early. I left at 14:30. Managers can't take a lunch if there's not a relief manager. So we had me, who worked 8 hours with no lunch, a manager who will work 9.5 hours with no lunch, and a non-management employee who will work 7.5 hours, no lunch. We get a pity stipend for food if we can't leave the store for a lunch as well. Let's break this down. 3 employees got a 1-hour meal penalty at 1 hour of our regular base pay. 3 employees got a 1-hour meal penalty at 1 hour of our regular base pay. 1 employee is working more than 9 hours, beyond 8 is time and a half. The company has to pay for their lunch, let's say $30. 1 employee was called in 2.5 hours earlier than scheduled. So even though we cut hours, it cost the company far more than keeping 1 extra person to be a layover. I'm sure I'll hear about it when I get back, but I was just following orders, which I have in writing. What's up guys, Uncle Jon here, welcome back to the channel. Today we're looking at r/malicious compliance. Tales from Tech Support's a little slow catching up this week, so we'll see what happens tomorrow, but as of right now, malicious compliance is what we've got. By the way, let me know what you think about maybe doing a short story like that first, right from the beginning, and then doing my intro like this where I run my mouth for a minute. And, does it work for you? Does it not work for you? Does it make a difference? Do you not care? Maybe. Anyway, let me know whichever way. As far as this story goes, again, management thinking they're being, the smart little bean counters and pencil pushers that they are. They think they're doing something great by just cutting hours. Well, the only way you can cut hours where it's generally speaking not going to cost the company money like this manager did, or non-manager. I don't know. Was OP a manager? I forget already. Anyway, they ended up cutting hours, but great. What you ended up doing was costing them more money in OT pay or time and a half pay. The only way to do it besides that is to basically run your store for less hours so you have less time with employees in it. And I'm pretty sure they don't want the stores open less hours, so how do you do that? I don't know. It always baffles me. I'm not management material because I can't think like a manager like that, I guess. Teacher wouldn't listen, so the entire class complied and he got fired. This happened in the early 2000s in my junior year of high school. The district had just built the 3rd high school in our city, and most of the teachers were new. The band director was one of those new hires. He was qualified for the job but had 0 people skills and was extremely abrasive towards students. He had previously taught university and couldn't wrap his head around the fact that high school students are not college-level music majors who live in practice rooms and write symphonies in their sleep. His normal behavior consisted of berating students for not knowing university-level curriculum, talking down to everyone about how he can't understand why they're so incompetent, and stopping rehearsals to go on long tangents about things that had nothing to do with music. Every day at least 2 to 3 students would leave class in tears. We complained to the higher-ups and they repeatedly brushed us off. He made students hate attending his music classes, and many dropped band and orchestra as a result. One of the classes he taught was supposed to be Intro to Music Theory. For those who don't know music, this would be a class that should typically teach things like different types of chords, the definition of music symbols, the logic behind key changes, etc. At the first class of the year, there were about 25 kids enrolled. Most of these were music and drama kids who wanted to be teachers or performers in the arts one day. On the first day, he handed us a quiz because he wanted to see how much we knew. I think there were maybe 3 to 5 kids who were able to attempt a single question on the quiz. No one got a single answer right. That's how advanced it was. Imagine signing up for what you think is a basic pre-algebra class and walking into advanced calculus. This teacher spent the entire class period berating us for not being prepared when no one could even attempt his quiz. We told him, "This is an intro class, none of us have learned anything like this before." And his response was, "Really? I thought this was an advanced class." The next class period, there were maybe 15 kids enrolled. He did the same thing, ask us to perform something we can't even understand, and then berate us for not being prepared. At every class he would say, "I thought you were all musicians. This is supposed to be an advanced class." By the end of the second week, there were 6 students left enrolled in his class, including myself. He softened up slightly to those of us who stayed and seemed to think we were his prized students and that this was his class of elites. Think Professor Slughorn from Harry Potter. In truth, we all thought he was insane and cruel, but the 6 of us had sufficient music background and experience to understand a fraction of his lessons. Without the bell curve, we all would have failed his class. A few months go by and we're at the end of the first semester. By now, every student connected to music in the school hated this guy, and repeated complaints had done nothing to fix the problem. The admins filed away every complaint but never did anything more than remind him that he's supposed to be more kind to students. He changes nothing and still berates students and makes them cry. So when it comes to the final exam for his theory class, he decides that he wants to give it to us early, so that on the day the final is supposed to be scheduled, we can have a class party instead. Of the 6 of us left, 4 of us had the same period after his class together as well. The class was AP English and we were prepping for the AP test. We had no problem with the class party and music right before the AP prep exam, so we didn't complain. The day comes of our music final exam, and after we finish the test, he tells us that for our class party, he wants to take us all to breakfast at a new IHOP that opened 20 minutes away. His class was first period. We tried to tell him all the issues with this plan. We were not allowed to leave campus without permission slips. It was a closed campus policy due to an incident where a student left campus for lunch and got hit by a car and was killed. We won't get back in time for second period, which is final exam. He doesn't have permission to remove us from the campus. What if there's an emergency and we're unaccounted for because we're not even at school? His solution was to tell us that after the start of class on our final class day, he would be going to IHOP, and if we wanted to join him, that was our choice. But if we didn't, we would have to stay in the classroom and not bring attention to the next that there was no class and no teacher. Without talking about it to each other, the 6 of us saw an opportunity to finally get the admin's attention to the complete disregard this teacher had for rules and policies. We made sure to inform our English teacher that we might be late to class on the day of the final due to a class field trip for music theory. She was irritated and reminded us that the final was very important and that she would not give us extra time if we came in late. We told her that we understood and gave her details about where we would be and what we would be doing and who we would be with. She said she still expected us to be in her class. On the day of the final, we all went to IHOP. That's International House of Pancakes for those of you who don't know. It took forever to get there because of construction and forever to get our food because the restaurant was newly opened and had a large number of customers. We got back to the school halfway through our second period class. The admins were waiting for us. Security was waiting for us. My English teacher had called the front office to complain that 4 of her best students were missing and that she was fairly certain we weren't even on campus. The admins had checked attendance and seen that we were all marked present that morning, and they had searched the entire school looking for our class. The 4 of us walked into our English final to a livid teacher. We knew she was pissed at us, but couldn't punish us beyond saying we had the same remaining time as the rest of the class, since we had been with the teacher in our absence. None of us did as well in the final as we could have if we had the full 87 minutes, but we were doing well enough in the class already that the lesser marks didn't affect the overall grade too much. The band teacher had a private reprimand that was so loud the entire school could hear it. He was confused as to why the administration was upset that he took minor children off campus without permission or notice, without proper school transportation or even a good reason. He stayed with his usual attitude, but this time towards the admins. Why are you guys so incompetent about this? They're old enough to drive. What's the problem? The English teacher, who I actually adore and was one of the best teachers I've ever had, absolutely went mama bear on the administration about how they could continue to employ someone who disrespects the other teachers so much as to deprive his students of their final exams and put them in potentially dangerous circumstances. He told us to drive ourselves to the restaurant, and any accidents or medical issues would have been the school's fault. He was fired later that day. Many of the students had a gleeful but confused reaction since the 6 of us weren't talking to anyone about it. All that most people knew was that this tyrant of a teacher was gone. We didn't spread the story very much of how it happened because we still feared being reprimanded for our involvement, since he technically gave us a choice to go with him or stay, but I always smiled when people gossiped about what the final straw was that got him fired. This guy. So, I've met people like this. They're college level professors. Some of them are even advanced in college terms, and then they go back and start teaching high school. I've actually seen high school teachers that go back and start teaching like a 3rd or 4th grade class, and in the beginning they're sort of the same way with their lower level students. They've made some adjustments to maybe account for the fact that they're not as far along as the high school students, but still not enough because it's hard for them to get their head around. They were trained to be at the higher level, teaching the older kids or whatever, the more advanced students. It'd be like me teaching my kids how to use a drill and expecting them to know how to hold it and how to balance it and, you know, when to start going faster with it, when to slow down and let off the trigger some, things like that. I mean, you got to start somewhere. There is always a beginning class somewhere. I went to 1 year of private Catholic school when I was a teenager, my first year, 9th grade, against my will, but that's another story for another video. Anyway, one of the other classes that I chose was band. Now, band for this class was sort of it was a kick around class. A lot of us were flunkies, but some of the other kids were actually in the marching band, so they knew some music theory and notes and things like that. I knew nothing. I still don't know music notes to this day. I can tell when my pitch is supposed to go up and down and things like that, but I can't name the notes. I can play some by ear and sort of follow the music along to know when I'm supposed to do things, but yeah, I'm just not good at it. But this was supposed to be an introduction. You picked an instrument, you learned the instrument in that class. And our band teacher sometimes would forget that not all of his students were his current people in the marching band. And he would forget that those of us that weren't in marching band were supposed to be learning from scratch. And he got a little flustered by it, and he would ease up after a while, but he usually started out as kind of an a-hole. What was his name? Mr. Newell. Mr. Newell was a 3-pack-a-day smoker, a little bit crabby, knew his stuff with music, and he did have a sense of humor once he got through that hard, crusty shell of his. But he would sit there with his leg crossed, sitting on his stool, arms crossed, with his lower lip stuck out. I don't know if he played trumpet too much or what, but he would sit there and scowl at you over his little half glasses, you know. And if you hit a wrong note, he'd go. We had one female next to me. Her name was Carol, and her last name sounded sort of clownish. So he would say, "Knock it off, you clown," you know, and he'd turn around and, A, not C, you know, and he'd just berate all the time. But we kind of got to the point where we would set him off on purpose just for the fun of it. One of the guys next to me, Italian guy, he would goof off all the time, just hit random notes and just, I don't know. He didn't sound like he was trying to hit any of the right notes. I would try, but I was usually off in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, reading this story brought me back to those band class days. And between him and teaching myself a little bit, which was hard because there was no internet like there is now, teaching myself how to play trumpet, alto sax, and I had played a little bit of percussion before that in grade school. Played the bass a lot. I got stuck with the bass drum a lot. It worked okay. Did a little bit of snare, but to this day I still don't play instruments very well because I just didn't put much into it, and our teachers weren't all that great. It's almost like having a failed performer who is now in charge of teaching other people how to do it because they really weren't that great of a performer, and they've got an attitude through the whole thing. That's kind of the way I felt about it, and I still do to a certain extent. But anyway, enough rambling. The guy was a D. Pretend the lot is full. Many decades ago, when I was a student enrolled in driving school, the instructor told me to pretend the lot is full and park the car. It was very early in the morning, so the shopping mall lot where we were practicing parking was empty. I knew that the pretend it's full part was meant to emphasize the importance of driving slowly and cautiously and centering the car between the lines, but my teenage brain couldn't resist the obvious opportunity for malicious compliance. I slowly drove up and down the lanes and around that lot for at least 5 minutes before the instructor finally got flustered and barked, "What are you waiting for? Park the car!" "You told me to pretend the lot's full." I give the instructor full props for accepting the malicious compliance humor of the moment as I watched him shake his head while his expression morphed from anger through the realization and into a smiling instruction to just park the car. Yeah, because let's face it, if the lot was actually full, you would have driven around and around and around looking for a space, because that's how malls are. So, sometimes you got to laugh a little. Otherwise, there's no point to life, As long as everybody got the point and they, knew to be cautious and he learned to lighten up just a little bit, it's all good. No pork. Working at Pizza Shack years ago when a gentleman came in to order carryout, we had a special going on, one topping large pizzas. He was a bit loud. Not mean exactly, just very forceful, and didn't like it when anyone talked except himself. He had this way of waiting for a question, then loudly answering it halfway through. I'd say, "Okay, what?" And he'd interrupt and say, "Meat lovers." And large! And so on. So I got the order, and so did everyone in the 3-mile radius, of 3 large meat lovers pizzas. I don't think he was deaf. He seemed to hear me just fine, but it seemed like he just couldn't stand it if anyone else said more than 3 words. And the pan crust with no pork. Now that was a bit of an issue. The meat lovers came with pepperoni, pork sausage, Italian sausage, beef, ham, and bacon. I thought perhaps he meant specifically he wanted to leave off the pork sausage, but it was hard to tell when I was unable to form an entire sentence. Eventually, after half the windows in the place had shattered, it became clear that he wanted no pork products on his pizza at all. So that left beef. Everything else on it is pork apart from the cheese and sauce. I attempted to explain this. No pork, he mentioned once or twice. Okay then, I tried to tell him the price difference, but my head started to hurt. So he paid for 3 meat lovers, which cost a lot more than 1 topping pizzas, and they came with beef on them. Basically, burger pellets. I left any further explanation up to my manager, who had heard the communication from his home 3 states away. I don't understand. There's a certain sect of people out there. Now, celiac is a real thing. Dairy intolerance, things like that. Allergies are a real thing. But there are a certain sect of people who will claim that they have an intolerance, an allergy, some sort of bad reaction to certain foods, and then play it up to the hilt, when in reality they don't have any of those. There's just attention seeking. Now, you can't assume that everybody's like this because, like I said, those issues are real. Some people can't have pork because of religious reasons maybe, or dietary reasons, or both. Okay, that's fine, but did you ever stop to think about what all those other meats are made of? I can almost guarantee you that there's been some people that walk in and say they don't want any pork on their pizza, but then they'll order pepperoni. Really? They'll order sausage. Really? Like, actually learn what certain things are made of before you start barking things out and thinking that you're being cute and getting a special order. You got a 1-topping pizza with beef on it. Congratulations. You went through all that fuss for nothing. It's not meat lovers. Maybe they thought that they were going to get the equivalent of that much beef on there, like beef times 3. But in reality, that's not how any of that works. You're going to get the same amount of beef that you would have gotten if you had pepperoni and the other meats on there as well. So, I don't know. It's just stupid. And the fact that he wouldn't let anybody else speak without cutting them off and being extremely loud. Being assertive is one thing. You need to be assertive in life so that you can self-advocate and, not let people walk all over you. At the same time, you need to let other people speak so that you can communicate effectively. Maybe. I don't know. Just answer my simple question. Years back, I had a temp job at a reception of a hospital. The concept of the hospital was that external doctors could book rooms for surgery and for their patients after surgery. If they had something bigger to do, they couldn't do in their own medical practice. There was also a sleep laboratory run by an external practice where patients stayed overnight for their examination/measurements. For that, usually the technician and the patients started coming in at around 7 p.m. and they all left at around 6 a.m. Usually anything besides the measurements during sleeping were done in the medical practice, which was in walking distance on the same street. The setting is random day somewhere way before 7 p.m. where usually nobody's in the sleep lab. Nice woman comes in and asks about the way to the sleep laboratory. I'm pretty sure that she's at the wrong location, and I explain that to her. I ask her to take a seat nearby and to give me a moment so I can check with the practice where she needs to go. She thanks me and takes a seat. While I'm still typing the number of the practice, enter Awful Woman. Awful Woman asks the same question as Nice Woman. I try to explain the situation, same as before, but she aggressively interrupts me and slams something along the lines of, "It can't be so hard to answer a simple question. Tell me where the sleep laboratory is now," in my face. Cue Malicious Compliance. I smile and tell her the way. First floor, to the right, and so on. Awful Woman walks off. I call the practice and they tell me that, as I expected, nobody's at the hospital that day and that every patient should go to the practice. And that they all should also know that because it's on their note with the date and time for the appointment. I inform Nice Woman and she gets going to the practice, probably still in time for her appointment. Awful Woman comes back after around 15 minutes and tells me that nobody's there. I just shrug and go back to my work. This is what I was talking about with Pizza Guy. If you're going to cut people off and be loud and obnoxious, you're not usually going to get the best results possible. Be nice to people. Be humble. That's the biggest problem in today's society. There's no humility at all. Everybody thinks they're special and more important, and they have places to be, and they're, I'm so important. Please get me to my. They don't even say please, but get me to my place where I need to be now. Okay, bossy. First of all, you don't run me. I don't work directly for you. I will be as nice as you let me be. One of my mom's exes had a saying of, "I'm as nasty as you make me and as nice as you let me be." Basically meaning he's going to match whatever energy you give, step by step by step. Every time you ramp it up, he's going to ramp it up too. And I kind of work under the same principle. If you're going to start out being hyper and, cutting me off and being all anxious or nasty or both, I'm probably going to be the same way. I'm very reactionary that way. I can only stay calm to a certain extent before I just lose my shit completely. So most people that even remotely know me by now know that, let's have a back and forth dialogue and not cut each other off and, start getting loud and mean, because I can get louder and I can be much meaner. So let's not play that game. And with that being said, would you be nice and maybe click on the next video here on the screen? I think you'll like it. If not, no big deal, but I do appreciate y'all being here, and I couldn't do half of what I do on this channel without y'all clicking on something, at least to watch. The comments are great, and I really appreciate the interaction. So anyway, till the next video, we'll see you.